I was raised in a lower middle-class household. For the first 8 years of my life, we lived in a 2-bedroom house trailer that sat on the banks of the Laurel River. I loved that trailer. I loved the way the rain sounded on its tin roof. I loved the compact length, the efficient way every space was utilized, the way the furnace was able to heat that small space in what seemed to me a matter of seconds. I loved that our doors didn't close like everyone else's, but rolled back and forth what I would later find to be pocket doors. Almost everyone in my family lived in trailers. I never thought anything of this fact, or the fact that we bordered on poverty, until one evening when I was playing out front of my aunt's trailer in the hottest part of the summer. I must have been around 10, and I was playing Star Wars with my cousin, John Paul, in the front yard. I was Luke Skywalker, he was Darth Vader. We were fighting to the death with our plastic lightsabers. We were both barefoot because it was high summer and we were children, not because we didn't have shoes. And then a car went by and blew its horn, causing us to look up. There was a man in his early 20s hanging halfway out of the car's windows. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "Trailer trash!" He was talking to us. It didn't matter that my aunt worked like a dog every night on the 3rd shift at the yarn factory, and that her freshly mown yard was meticulous, that her porch was populated by good solid furniture and bright geraniums. It didn't matter that we were human beings who were just trying to get by the best way we could, who had joys and sorrows like everyone else. To this car passing by, we were trash because we lived in trailers in a rural little town where nothing much ever happened in his eyes. In preparing for this speech, I Googled the words trailer trash to see what would pop up. I'll only share one of the results with you because most of them were too vulgar or disgusting to discuss in this forum. One of the results was of a cartoon character, an old woman smoking a corncob pie, toting a shotgun. Her dress looked as if it had been made from a flour sack, had a jagged hem. Her hair was a wild rat's nest, her nose abnormally knotty. This image isn't very far from the stereotypical image of a hillbilly. In the larger public's mind, anyone who is an Appalachian is a hillbilly, and anyone who is a hillbilly also fits their definition of what they deem trailer trash. And anyone who is trailer trash in their eyes is less than human, not even deserving of a decent home wherein to live. Being called trailer trash was a defining moment for me. I've never forgotten it. Those 2 words hit me in the gut, not so much because they were directed at me, but because they were directed at most everyone I knew and loved. My people had been reduced to 2 words, 2 ugly words. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter how much money you were raised with, or how you were raised, or what kind of accents you have. A whole lot of people in the world assume that because you're Appalachian, you are the same as that image they have. Trailer trash. I have a recent picture of my entire family taken on my mother's birthday. None of them are toothless or wearing flour sack dresses. None of them are sucking on bottles of whiskey and smoking with both hands. None of them are lazy. They certainly do not smoke corncob pipes and only occasionally tote shotguns. They go to work every day. They have cell phones and iPods. They are aware of the large world and grieve for it. All of them have lived in trailers at some point in their lives. Some of them still do. All of them are Appalachians. All of them would proudly identify as hillbillies. They're not trash. They're human beings. They're my people. They're your people. By the time I was a teenager, my parents had clawed their way up to firmly middle class, and we never went for anything. But my parents had lived the kinds of Appalachian childhoods that people think everyone here had. My mother was orphaned at a young age and survived on the kindness of cousins who took her in. She never had a bicycle or a birthday cake her entire childhood. For years, she had only 1 pair of shoes. I have a picture of her that I can hardly stand to look at. In the picture, she's about 9, and she's holding a doll that is about as big as she is. The doll has a china head and is wearing an abnormally large bonnet. What is so heartbreaking is the knowledge that she had borrowed the doll from a neighbor so she could have her picture made with it, since she owned no doll of her own. My father was raised by a single mother who had 8 other children to raise after my grandfather died. They barely scraped by, and all the children had to go to work before they were 15. Eventually, Granny had to lease her land to a coal company to survive and was finagled out of a fortune in the process. The company took millions of dollars worth of coal out of her land at Happy Holler and left her with hardly anything to show for it. My grandmother once said that whoever named Happy Holler certainly never lived there. My father went to fight in Vietnam to help the family. Once I was a teenager and realized that I had everything I wanted and understood all the sacrifices my parents had made so that I could be in that comfortable position, I often felt guilty that they had suffered so much, that they had worked their fingers and backs down to the bone, and they had been treated badly to get where they were, because they were both ridiculed for being Appalachian. My father, while in the service, and my mother especially when they went north to find work in the mid-60s. When she got a job at a refrigerator factory up north, her co-workers would gather around her on her lunch break and insist that she talk for them. It took her a while to realize they were making fun of her, but she didn't let them. She told them off. She put them in their place. She stood up for herself. She fought back by telling them that it wasn't all right for them to make fun of her and her people and where she was from, that was her home. But she fought back in other ways too, by working harder to get out of poverty, by coming back home, by making sure that her son became the first person in our family to go to college. I have always been crazy about words and sentences and books. Even when I was very little, I would run my hand over the pages of a book or put my face down into the pages and breathe in that crisp, sharp smell of ink and paper. I loved saying words aloud, trying to figure out their origins. I loved looking up words in the huge, thick dictionary in our house to see what they meant. After a time during my childhood, I moved on from the dictionary to the encyclopedia. Back then, the encyclopedia was 20-some big books. Ours was the World Book Encyclopedia, green and white with a gold stripe all the way around and a little globe on the front etched in gold. I see some of y'all remember. Its pages had the tangiest, most pungent smell. I can still smell those books. They smelled like something new even after they were 20 years old. They smelled like knowledge, which was what I was craving so badly. I must have read the entire encyclopedia, every single letter of the alphabet 2 or 3 times. In the sea, for instance, I found out everything I ever wanted to know about cattle and Cambodia and cabbage and cancer and the Civil War, about coal mining and how the calendar was invented and how cotton was grown. I love to learn about each of the states. The pages on Kentucky, my home state, are completely worn out now. The World Book was my first true friend, always waiting there on the shelf for me, always reliable, full of information. Although she was not a big reader, my mother always put a lot of store by words and information. The World Book was a big investment, a major step in educating me, a gamble on my future. Back then, just about 30 years ago, people went around selling the World Book door to door, an innocent time when salesmen could come to your door and not be turned away or cursed out. I was still a baby when the man in the fedora came to the door of our little red and white house trailer and knocked. I'm grateful to him for trusting us. Most salesmen sneered at the trailers that sat close to the railroad tracks there on Robinson Creek, thinking the people inside couldn't possibly afford such treasures. But this salesman knocked, and my mother eased the door open. I can picture her, probably sleepy from getting off late at the refrigerator factory where she worked in town. She hadn't even awakened like she usually did to fry my father an egg sandwich and see him off to his job as a mechanic at the gas station out in the interstate. I can see her listening closely as he showed her one of the World Books, explaining all the knowledge that lay within. I imagine that I woke up halfway through his sales pitch and she finished listening while holding me in the crook of her elbow, a glass bottle in my mouth. He completed the sale as she put me on her shoulder, patting my back until I burped. It pains me to think of her going to her little mason jar of savings in the trailer bedroom, counting out the ones that would serve as the down payment, filling out the paperwork so that he could bill her for the rest. I picture us sitting there after the salesman left, my mother thumbing through all the books, hoping I would grow to like them, to use them. I did more than that. I cherished them. And from the World Book, I moved on to other books that would change my life. The Outsiders, the Bible, To Kill a Mockingbird, Jude the Obscure, My Antonia, and eventually I wrote my own books and fulfilled my dream of becoming a writer.